there are plenty of problems that large language models are really not going to solve.
This is how we actually think, and it's like very messy and very realistic and very approximative in the way we approach problems. If we can get a better system that can do coding for us beyond just kind of probabilistic matching, I think that could really turbocharge technology in general. I've been in tech long enough to see that technological trends take a long time to spread.
If Thomas Edison were around today, we'd all be doing things by candlelight because they would make electricity illegal.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Because electricity is incredibly dangerous.
If you build machine learning models for a while, there's one thing to actually think that something can be done versus like when they actually try to actually do it. If you Kaggle Grandmaster, you Kaggle Grandmaster. It's very hard to kind of fake. Getting to that level is much harder than, getting a PhD from some of the top universities.
Well, hello, everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with yet another Infinite Loops. Today, I am super excited to have Bojan Tunguz, a person that I met on Twitter, completely on Twitter. And why I met him on Twitter, he is an amazingly accomplished person, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the reason that I met him was because he's incredibly funny. I started seeing his tweets going by, and every time I either had a smile or a laugh. And then I look into you, Bojan, and wow, like you are super impressive. Born in Sarajevo, came to the United States. You got multiple degrees in physics at Stanford, and then a PhD at the University of Illinois. You are a Kaggle Grandmaster. I got to ask you about that because that seems really, really cool. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show. You and I interacted a lot for the last few months, at least on Twitter, and finally we get to chat with each other.
Yeah, it's great. And what's cool about it is what I love about Twitter is I was originally attracted to you because you were funny. And so I started following you, and then I started looking into you, and I'm like, holy shit, let's jump right into the whole Kaggle Grandmaster thing.
Sure.
I didn't know too much about it. And oh my God, what you have to do to become a Grandmaster. First off, there's only about 300, right, in the entire world.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and what led you into wanting to do that, given the fact that you moved from physics to machine learning, artificial intelligence. You're at NVIDIA. I think I've heard of that company. They have a couple of things, but let's jump in on the Kaggle Grandmaster.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know or never heard of Kaggle, and there's still a lot of people out there, even in the tech world, who haven't heard of it, Kaggle is a data science competitions website that started like about, I think, 10 years ago, like something like that.
Yeah.
It posts machine learning competitions. That's how it became famous. But over the years, tried to become much more comprehensive site for all sorts of data science related tasks. It kind of got me hooked when I was kind of switching my careers. And that in itself is a long story, how I end up in data science and machine learning. I just today I had another conversation, a little bit contentious online about like the future of education and higher education in particular. And, as you mentioned, I do have a lot of pretty advanced degrees, and I have, taught in colleges and whatnot, but none of that's really kind of led to any kind of sustained kind of career, especially in fields that like physics that are, I'm sad to say, it's on the kind of its dying legs. So like I really needed to find something else to do with my life, and I really didn't feel like going back to school. So I tried a lot of online resources, and in machine learning community in general is very, very generous with a lot of online teaching material. Some of the first MOOCs were in artificial intelligence. I actually signed up for the first one. I didn't finish, but I did sign up for it. I did a lot of like well-known online courses like Andrew Ng's machine learning intro course, a few other on Coursera, Udacity. But none of those courses were like really getting me anywhere professionally. And like, unfortunately, even though I think they've improved a lot over the years, but we still live in a world where like a college degree is sort of a gold standard, and everything else seems like a much less of a accomplishment. So, I was looking around. I heard of Kaggle ever since I joined data science, but I always thought it's impossible, and I don't have either background or like know-how to actually do anything there. But then one year I just decided, okay, like forget about it. I'm just gonna try something, see how far I get, and kind of the rest is history. I joined the competitions. I was just finding my way around, and quickly discovered that Kaggle kind of solves two big problems in online education, at least for people who are willing to kind of go through everything. And, I can go more and more in what it takes to actually get to the top. First of all, it has a very strong incentive structure to kind of keep you coming back for learn. So like a continuous learning, you can experiment and learn just by doing. So that's a very, very nice kind of setup that they have over there. And then I realized that people who do win these competitions, who really are on top of the leaderboards, you can't just get there randomly. You cannot just kind of, it's not like a lottery that you just kind of take a lottery ticket and you kind of end up on the top. You really have to have a lot of good skills. So people who are on top of the leaderboards, and I've been blessed to kind of work with many of them over the years, are very good, smart people. And these leaderboards really serve a purpose of very credible credentials. So something that a lot of other online resources don't quite get, you don't really, if you get some kind of online degrees, from one of these online places, the question is are you really as good as, someone else from some other online degree? On Kaggle, at least people who are more honest about it, if you're Kaggle Grandmaster, you're Kaggle Grandmaster. There's very hard to kind of fake, and in many ways, getting to that level is much harder than, getting a PhD from some of the top universities.
Yeah. And when I was reading about it, I was kind of floored by, first off, what you have to do to get it.
Yeah.
The number of gold medals, the number of various projects, everything I really found fascinating. But I also found it really interesting how hyper competitive it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I saw a quote from you that was I love hyper competitive learning. So why do you love it to be hyper competitive?
I don't know which quote is that. I do and don't. I feel like, and I've tried to reflect more about this over the years. And I think that's one of the potentially more problematic sides of Kaggle, because it doesn't only attract the smartest people, it also attracts the most competitive people. And a lot of them are not pleasant in the way they're competitive. So, I have, war stories and war wounds over the years from those kind of experiences. My own mindset is I kind of don't personalize the leaderboards. For me, leaderboards is kind of abstract thing, and I kind of measure my own progress against the leaderboard, in abstract. I don't think of these people who are ahead of me or below me as human beings that I need to defeat or I'm better than or something like that. So I feel like a leaderboard is more I'm being competitive with myself. I'm trying to be a better version of myself, and I kind of use these leaderboards as a measuring tool for roughly gauge where I am in my own progress. So I am and I'm not competitive. So I'm not competitive in the sense that I want to be better than other people. I want to be just better than my previous self. So that's how I'm coming from.
I think that's actually the best kind of competitive. And so I totally agree with you, Bojan. And what you're really saying is, okay, so here are these people above me. What do I need to do? What do I need to do to get up there? And then really not thinking other than, wow, okay, there's a whole bunch of people who aren't even where I am. So that kind of gives you a dopamine boost there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as long as you're, competing against yourself, I think that is the best type of competition. And if you're going to be comparative, I found that the best way to do that is to only compare yourself to your former self, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to other people. You mentioned it at the beginning, the switch from physics to data science. Talk to me about that. I know that, theoretical physics, not a lot of jobs outside of academia or certain hedge funds, I know. But what tell that story.
So, I needed a job. So the question is what can I do? And I really didn't feel like going in a many of the options that were viable because, I would still have to kind of essentially go back to school, try the new things. And, like I was sort of fiddling online, doing a lot of tech blogging for a while. That was kind of keeping me occupied. And I just accidentally stumbled upon the data science. And it really kind of jumped at me because it was just the right proportion of like technical skill and analytical skills. It's, you need to be more technical than, statisticians or someone who just does, paper and pencil or with small kind of work. But, you're not same thing as, software engineers who are just kind of worrying over the code all the time. So like, it was right proportion. It really kind of, it played to the way my mind works, I think. So like, it really became like, like I wish there was something like this when I was in school or something, that was that kind of moment, like I still love physics. It's really intellectually extremely gratifying thing, but it's very hard to kind of get that stuff and kind of apply to your work and life and other things. And but in data science, like you can data science just your way through a lot of world daily problems. You can figure out how to optimize maybe your grocery list or like your savings accounts or whatnot. It's really fascinating once you get into that whole field, how much it can actually be applied. And that's one of the most wonderful things about data science. So, like I found all these online resources. It really clicked with me, and I'm really happy to be that world.
Yeah, my friend David Ha, who was briefly at Stability AI as our lead researcher, he and I were talking about it, and he said what draws people to the field, in his opinion, was just incredible curiosity, but they also love to tinker and they love to solve puzzles.
Yeah.
Would you agree that that's a good way of looking at it?
Could be. Like I'm more of a thinker than puzzle solver. It's not really the same kind of. I think again, like the whole world of data science and machine learning and now AI has many options for people with a different kind of sensibilities and skills. Like I do know a lot of people who are really kind of hardcore puzzle solvers, and you can put them in a bookstore with one of those puzzle books, and they can be as happy as a clam. It's for me, it's not so much the puzzle solving, but more about kind of big idea thinking. So like understanding the world. So for me, understanding gives you much more of a deeper personal satisfaction than just kind of solving a new puzzle. Like puzzles are fine, but I find them a little bit dry and kind of too abstract for my liking. But like being able to come to a new problem and then extract from it a new understanding about something about the world, that's the most gratifying thing that keeps me going.
Yeah, satisfying in terms of getting a better understanding of the underlying system and then letting that inform the way you approach it. I agree on that. Yeah. You said in 2021 that you've been floored by advances in natural language programming, but you also said, hey, it's just getting started.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that and what you see coming for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah. Years ago, like, when I was in Kaggle, like I think 5.5 years ago, when I really tried to learn more about natural language processing and really for the first time started applying myself to it and came in a third in one of the competitions with my team. I thought like, wow, like I finally understand this whole field and it's like very interesting and it has a lot of potential. So I thought like I would get more involved with it. But then things started moving really fast and really advanced. And I'm like, okay, I'm having a whiplash here and I feel it feels moving way faster than I'm going to have the time or energy to kind of keep up with. And like, I'm going to kind of just sit on the sidelines, see how fast it goes and where it ends up. And maybe in a couple of years, I'll catch up and start like fiddling with it more. And, there was no slowing down. It just, went from, strength to strength and things are moving really, really fast. And, now it's, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise, not only how fast it's moving, but how powerful these very conceptually straightforward approaches are. So that, the whole transformers and large language models that can get you, essentially, fitting relationship between words and, in the bigger and bigger context can actually produce some kind of emergent behaviors like pretty decent reasoning or thinking, that can actually, by itself get you pretty far. It's still not perfect, far from it, but the fact that we even here, I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, even people who are who thought they were, at the cutting edge of the field. In terms of where it's going, I think it's anyone's guess. I think we are still, bigger and better models that are being trained all the time, and now that people know that this is the approach to better AI, it's everyone is in the field. So I think until last year, I think there was still fair amount of skepticism, or people are not really impressed with what's going on, or what we can really accomplish, and how useful all this can be. But I think now all those considerations are laid to rest, and everyone who has any kind of interest in the field is there. And we are just getting started with full engine, full throttle of all the resources that are being thrown at this, and better than I do, what startups are working on. So it's still very early, because now we finally have full attention of everyone who matters. Going all in on this whole generative AI thing.
Yeah, and another thing that I've seen you note, which I agree with, is that there are plenty of problems that large language models are really not going to solve. And talk a little bit about that, because that resonates very deeply with me.
Yeah, I think it became obvious with these large language models, but people are making fun of them. But I think it's obvious now that the thinking and reasoning are two different things. That these large language models are sort of giving us the mirror to ourselves. And what we see is okay, so this is how we actually think, and it's very messy and very probabilistic and very approximative in the way we approach problems. And these large language models can get pretty far doing that, and actually that's what we do. When we interacting with our friends or coworkers, or in any kind of big interaction, we don't really try to really solve these deep reasoning kind of problems. That we use a lot of heuristics, a lot of kind of approximate approaches. So it can get us fine. But if you really want to get to something that's really hard, it's not going to get you there. So if you really want to solve some hard equations, just BSing through math is not going to get you there. If you want to kind of create new knowledge, other approaches really would kind of come in complementary. So one big area of research where I know some very famous AI labs are working on now is automated math reasoning. It's something that we still don't have any kind of firm foundation for. But mathematics is usually considered is the queen of all the intellectual disciplines, as well as the potentially most productive in the terms of what we can kind of gain from these systems. So coming up with systems that can leverage some of these AI natural language processing things to get us to sort of a place where we can actually apply other methods. So, figuring out some kind of approximate solution that we can then solve exactly using different kind of methods. So, get ideas of the outline of the proof for our math problems, and then use these reasoning methods to kind of get us there. I think that's similar to the way chess was solved or Go was solved, where you had these probabilistic models, and then you kind of do exact calculations as a part of the final process. So that would be one of them. I think coding would be the big thing that everyone is working on. If we can get a better system that can do coding for us, beyond just kind of probabilistic matching, I think that would be extremely useful, and could really turbocharge technology in general.
Yeah, and you make the point about Deep Blue and beating the chess grandmasters and then Go. But another point that you also make that I like to highlight is the idea that after Kasparov lost, he figured, what about man and machine, the so-called centaur model?
Yeah.
And what we found was not only did Deep Blue make human chess grandmasters much, much better, it made just people who weren't even at the grandmaster level much better chess players as well. What's going on there?
In chess specifically, or in general, is this kind of model?
Let's start with chess, but then because I hold that it you could generalize it to other areas of learning as well.
Yeah. So my understanding is that now, because you essentially everyone can have a mentor to teach you chess that's sort of beyond like top human player, it's much easier to kind of practice that. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities for AI systems in general, not just for chess, but having personal tutors that can really improve whatever you're trying to get good at. Like imagine having a better person who can grade you for your math scores or your drawing, for instance. I want to get back to drawing, and I want to figure out how to use generative AI to improve my own drawing skills. And I think that's really turbocharged a lot of amateurs to become even better players than otherwise they would have been, because sparring against the best system is always going to improve you. Like metal sharpens metal. And then the whole centaur model that you mentioned was very viable with human-computer interactions, where humans were providing kind of intuitive parts of the puzzle, with the computers working on the hard parts of things. I think that was a very viable approach to being the best in chess for a while. But my understanding is like with latest systems, even centaurs really can't keep up with the best chess computer-only chess players. So I think that right now we are beyond centaur. So I think something like that is going to happen with other fields, where for a while a human plus AI is going to dominate just AI or just humans, and then eventually AI is just going to kind of take off and just be in a league of its own.
One of the things that I believe pretty deeply in, and we've invested in companies. So, for example, you're talking about drawing. One of our portfolio companies is called Wand, and it's basically for graphic artists. And it is literally a tool, but the wand attaches to the AI, and then they essentially get to iterate against their own work. It's really, really cool. Yeah. But the part that I like about it is AI, at least for right now, AI I see as an incredible tool, maybe one of the coolest tools we've ever invented.
Yeah.
To be able to allow for the flourishing and extension of human creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. Painfully so. The problem is all of a sudden, I want to go back to all sorts of doodlings and the little side projects I did decades ago, because hey, now I can do it even better than I ever tried before. But so it's sort of a distraction from my day-to-day job, because I feel like building AI versus using AI to build something else, it's like a huge trade-off. I wish I could draw comics now, or make little cartoons or whatnot. And I really wish I had more time to kind of dedicate to some of these other activities. So yeah, it's a very distracting, for me at least. It's incredibly enticing, and I think a lot of people will be entering fields and whatnot that otherwise would have probably not done so. I'm really excited to expose my own children to some of these tools. So I really want to see what they can do, what once they understand, and they're still pretty young, so they're not at the stage where they can actually really take full advantage of these things. But I think it's going to be very exciting for a lot of creative pursuits. And, I'm just giddy with excitement about it all.
As am I. You mentioned your kids, and I saw somewhere that you are going to homeschool your kids.
Yeah.
Why are you going to take that path?
Many reasons. Part of it is, I coming from outside of the U.S. And being exposed partially to American public schools, I was kind of really kind of let down. I felt like the schools were not quite as good as what I'm used to growing up. Even some not so well-to-do countries, like that schooling is much more rigorous and you really learn much more. So that was one of the kind of disappointments. Other big thing that became bigger and bigger over the years is what we were talking earlier, like I'm not really happy with how educational system works in general, and I feel like so much of it is kind of wasteful and not really focused and not really tailored to individual people's needs. Like I have 3 kids, each one has a very different approach to learning, very different mindset, and trying to kind of put them all through the same kind of one size fits all process, I feel would be doing them this disservice. So like I really want to do something that's much more tailored to each one of their needs and interests. So that's another reason. And another reason is like we like to travel, so we don't want to kind of be beholden to the school year or when it starts, when it ends. We can just pick up and go and go across the country or across the world, but but it really suits our schedule, not really school years.
Yeah, I completely concur about the antiquated nature of the United States school system. I think actually AI tutoring, for example, is one of the best use cases because we've seen at Stability AI, for example, we got a remit to educate using AI in tablets, I think it's a third of the kids of the African state of Malawi.
Really?
And still very early days, but it appears that the kids who are have the AI tutors are like leaps and bounds ahead of the kids that are in the traditional classes. And so,
like user technology with kids is very controversial subject, and I have opposing views about it myself. But I have seen it that my kids have learned how to read and write on their own, like just by using these tablets. So like I didn't even introduce some of these things to them. They kind of picked up by just playing these games, by putting letters around and vocalizing what they're reading. And it can be a very powerful tool for like early literacy and all sorts of things that prior not possible. Especially with AI, and really be a huge boon to education across the board.
I agree. And I would take it a step further and say that children are designed evolutionarily to be learning machines.
Yeah.
And one of the big mistakes that we've made in the past, in my opinion, is that we spent way too much time trying to teach children what to think rather than how to think.
Mm-hmm.
And, we give fellowships from O'Shaughnessy Ventures, and one of the first ones we gave was to a couple with 5 young kids, and they wanted to investigate and ultimately make a documentary about alternative ways to do it with children.
Okay.
And what we're seeing when you look into these methods is these methods, by and large, not all, but by and large, are harnessing that child's innate desire to learn. And then kind of letting them loose, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that something? Have you designed a curriculum for your kids, or not that far?
We have sort of like a core curriculum that's actually very traditional. It doesn't involve any technology. So we go over, reading, writing, math. These are kind of core things that we do. Then I try to expose them to a little bit of history and geography through a lot of books that I try to get them to read on their own. So there's that. A lot of games are actually very educational. So like, Minecraft, for instance, it can teach you a lot about mining and ores and all these things that I never myself knew about. So now kids might teaching me. So like asking me like, so what's the bedrock? And like, okay, I have to explain to you what bedrock is, and I barely know it myself. So yes, I think the core of our curriculum is very traditional, just pencil and paper stuff, but more of the additional things are that they kind of pick up on their own are a little bit more kind of technology driven. Another thing is like we right now in the process of moving. So we right now in a very small town in Indiana, and we are moving to Florida. And one of the reasons why we wanted to move to a bigger place is exactly so we can actually have more exposure to, for our kids, for more educational resources outside of the traditional system that we hope we can get in a bigger place.
Yeah. Another thing that I know you're interested in and think a lot about, especially with how AI might or machine learning might impact it, is the future of work.
Oh yeah,
And you and I share another thing. I think I don't want to speak for you. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I at least I think you maintain that human creativity is going to improve to a point where it would have been impossible to get it to that point without these new tools. Do you agree? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it people are saying that these new generative AI systems are just stochastic parents or something. They're just kind of parenting back to us. But the kind of things I've seen are very original, very kind of unique. And so it exposes you to much wider spectrum of things that you probably wouldn't have never thought about. So you can give a prompt to one of these systems, say draw me a frog made out of cheese on the moon or something like that. And there was no prior image of that anywhere. So just kind of being able to kind of experiment with these ideas or what they would look like. I think for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, the key to creativity is iterative experimentation. So more you can try, more things you can try out, more things you can see how they work out, and closer the feedback loop is, the better you can get. And every single thing that I became really good at in life, there was a very close iterative loop. So the Kaggle, you build a model, you submit it to leaderboard, or try to local validation, you see how it performs, go back to the drawing board. So it was a very tight iterative loop that's really kind of helped me get ahead. And I think generative tools as well, if you're an artist or you're writing code and you can see what certain function would look like, how it would do, it will give you more options and more varied options to try out and kind of get better feedback from all of them. So I think that the flywheel of this very tight iterative feedback loop is going to be amazing for a lot of people in a lot of fields.
I agree on the tightness of the feedback loop and the plethora of additional choices that generative AI makes available to you. I loved your example, a mouse on the moon made of cheese, and there it is, right? Yeah. And then you think, oh well, and then that leads again to your tight iterative loop to ideas that you probably wouldn't have had. So I'm 63 years old. When I was younger, pretty much people thought you were smart if you had a good memory.
Yeah.
And now I always thought that was a bad definition. And because I always thought that the ability to think, to synthesize ideas, to iterate, as you say, was superior. And I definitely think that generative AI is going to help a lot in this particular area. If we're going to look at sectors, right, which sectors do you think are going to be able to use the tools of machine learning and generative and other AI as the biggest lever? And which sectors would you say are probably not going to really be too terribly affected by it?
Sure. I think the latter ones would actually be much wider number than people realize. Not only because of generative AI, because I've been in tech long enough to see that technological trends take a long time to spread, and there's a lot of inertia, and there are a lot of barriers to entry for all sorts of reasons. Some of them are legitimate, some of them are just kind of made up in order to kind of keep people in certain positions. And so I think the whole process is going to affect people on the ground much slower than I had originally thought. So when all ChatGPT came out in November last year, I was like, holy crap, we are on the verge of just major disruption across the economy, across everything. This time the next year, the whole world is going to be completely different. But no, it didn't quite happen. So I think on the low end, things will take a while to kind of percolate. On high end, I think people for all the building AI tools are in the best position to actually build the tools for themselves that will make them even more effective. So people who know how to code, people who know how to kind of build better models, they will be very efficient if they choose to at building even better tools and better models if they choose to. In between, I think our creative pursuits like literature writing, comic books could be affected. The question is how. We really don't know. I think like with every other technology, we will have new professions that will pop up that people never thought about before, that will be enabled, and new skills that prior did not exist. Like this, we all make fun of prompt engineering, but it really is a very good skill. And like people who know how to create very creative prompts and how to use these tools and how to chain them, those are skills. They're not maybe the same as software engineering skills, but they're very marketable, valuable skills that people are able to kind of promote. So I think, high-end people who know how to use AI will be better at getting even more out of AI. At low-end, people who are, I don't know, clerks at your local post office probably not going to be affected one way or the other, for a long time. So I think there's the spectrum, at least in the knowledge industry.
Yeah. And one of the things that I worry about is, on the one hand, I think it's vitally important for us to understand as best we can the technology, and its benefits are obviously numerous, but we also need to spend time thinking about the problems.
Yeah.
But then I also see, and it concerns me, there's this kind of all-in doomerism.
Yeah.
And I look at a lot of the people who are like the most pessimistic, and I don't see too much domain knowledge in technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I was recently interviewed for blog post, and that was exactly one of the points I was making, that it seems the most prominent doomers are really not technologists, not in the sense that, someone who can actually build even decent machine learning model or something like that. And one thing that you discovered, if you build machine learning models for a while, is that there's one thing to actually think that something can be done versus like when they actually try to actually do it. And that's one of the things that I loved about Kaggle. It dispersed so many of my own intuitions and my own grand visions of what a great model would be like. Like so many of them never really pan out to anything, or if anything, were even worse than just very simple models. So, it's this, it happens everywhere where, outsiders have much different or more inflated ideas like what's possible in people who are actually trying to work in the field. But I think in machine learning modeling, it's particularly acute because, our models are great and not as easy to make as some people outside think they are, and it takes it's still a lot of effort and a lot of, attention to details and things that people don't really pay attention to actually get something even slightly better than what you've had before. And then there are all sorts of unknowns like that we may run into, like, okay, this approach and scaling laws work until maybe they don't. So it could be like, we're thinking it's an exponential curve and maybe actually some kind of sigmoid, and sigmoid starts flattening out maybe in a couple of months, maybe next year or something, and we've kind of reached saturation point that we did not anticipate with the current approaches. And but a lot of doomers just see exponential curve and connect three dots for exponential and say like, okay, the next thing we know is these things are going to destroy our whole world. I think what they also misunderstand is how big a disruption rather than destruction is going to be. So, we did talk a little bit right now about like which fields are going to be most effective, which ones not. There's some rough guesses what we can do. And, I talk to people who are trying to estimate these things, and no one really knows for sure, like which fields are going to be the most effective, which ones are not. We can sort of take a look and kind of take a stock of what specific tasks people in these fields are doing, and then kind of try to estimate which ones are easier to automate, which ones are less. But, it's still a very rough estimate. So we know that disruptions are coming, but we just don't know how they're going to break. And like go from these disruptions to full-scale doomerism, I think is a huge leap. That's where I'm coming from.
I agree completely. And it's a challenge for me, at least, to try to walk the line where I want to be categorical with people, where I say, I am not being Panglossian here. I am not saying there are not going to be problems. There are going to be problems. And the way I look at it is, it's much better to acknowledge that fact and then, try to start thinking about countermeasures, trying to start thinking about ways around them. And it just concerns me because, like, I joke sometimes that if Thomas Edison were around today, we'd all be doing things by candlelight because they would make electricity illegal. Why? Because electricity is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Like I think, we are in the early stages of like second industrial revolution. So like, we know that first industrial revolution had an incredible impact on, lives of people and society in very unpredictable ways. And there was a lot of disruption. Some of it was very violent. To this day, we are, struggling to kind of come to terms with a lot of disruption that the industrial revolution voiced. And I think similar things will happen with this, AI revolution. I'm not Panglossian either. Like I think we are in it for some very challenging times, and I think overall, just like industrial revolution, our overall lives are going to improve. But on individual levels, a lot of people will be winners and losers. And how do we deal as a society with the vast numbers of losers, in the sense that they're not on the winning side, and what benefits AI brings. And, how to kind of deal with that is going to be a big challenge. I don't have any answers. I'm just barely kind of speculating about what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is kind of a bug in human OS is, first off, we tend to think that what we know now is kind of everything there is to know.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is absolutely not true. If you invented a time machine, and we went back 500 years and found the most brilliant human on the planet, we'd find that 90%, 95% of what he or she believed was completely wrong. Right? Yeah. And so, in the way I look at it is like, it's big, we have no idea what professions are going to get created because this new technology. And it's very easy for people to talk about professions that will be impacted or eliminated because we know about that profession, right?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. Your phrase, or Donald Rumsfeld's phase, the unknown unknowns, right? It's very difficult. There's a great quote that I can't remember whose it is, but it goes along the lines of, no matter how smart, no matter how creative, no matter how brilliant a human being, there's no way that you could ask them to make a list of things that would never occur to them. And yet we kind of struggle with this. We fall into this idea that we can do that. On the field with a lot of the doomers, what I find is they go immediately to AGI, right? And then, of course, we have James Cameron's Terminator there. And by the way, another thing, as I said at the introduction of our chat, your humor is just great. You had on Twitter my favorite conference room, and it's Skynet. But what do you think? Like, do you think AGI in the broader sense of like truly sentient machine intelligence, do you think that's either desirable or possible?
Possible for sure. And the question is like, how we define AGI, what we think of AGI. I have a sort of a working definition of what I would consider AGI, and this will be AI system that can pretty much replace any introductory knowledge worker in any field that we can think of. So like, level 3 engineer or something in a software company, or or an accountant or like paralegal person, and how far are we from that? And that's the question that I gonna spend the whole summer trying to answer. Like I was in Palo Alto and the Bay Area, talking to a lot of very smart people affiliated with these things, and there's a sense that those kind of systems are around the corner. Like maybe not immediately within the next 6 to 12 months, but that's where we head. Like you have agents that can perform any kind of knowledge work that any one of us could be doing, like right out of college for any kind of company. So I think that kind of AGI is coming. AGI that can pretty much do any human work is probably not that much farther down the road either. I think again, like doomers, rely a lot on science fiction, and a lot of us have criticized them as this is just a fan fiction that they coming up with. And I think in the classical movies, we don't have many examples of benevolent AI that's not kind of embodied in these destructive robots. So like we immediately jump from like no AI to these perfectly anthropomorphic robots that can kind of kill anyone. And then like we kind of made it in the movies. There are very few examples where you don't have anthropomorphic robots, and yet you have kind of AGI agents. Like HAL 9000 is probably one of the best examples, although what happened in the movie is probably not the best example of what could happen. But that's much closer to what we will first encounter over the next few years than Terminators or like a Matrix or some of these other really kind of outlandish things, or even iRobot or like Steven Spielberg's AI. So these are so we don't have many templates against which to think. It just as a general population, and I think we have to come up with a better. Maybe we have to come up with a better fiction, to kind of account for these things. Maybe someone needs to make a better like a movie that's not destructive, but is disruptive in certain ways and like kind of challenge these things. I think Her was a good movie as well that kind of delves in those issues, and I think that also is just around the corner. So there are a few examples of more realistic, I think, first encounters with advanced AI than Terminator movies.
Yeah, that's in fact at O'Shaughnessy Ventures, two of our verticals, Infinite Films and Infinite Media, are designed to actually, as part of their remit, do exactly that. Come up with far more optimistic use cases, movies, scenarios. Because like if you look at old science fiction like H.G. Wells and others, it was pretty optimistic, not the other way around.
Yeah.
One use case that, as I was listening to you, that I thought of because I've thought about it a lot, is the potential great benefits that we could get from kind of a personalized mental health AI. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, I had a tweet about it too, and got a lot of interesting reactions. I think there's still a lot of stigma associated with seeking help for mental issues. My wife, she's a psychologist, and not really a psychiatrist or even clinical psychologist, but still like talking about mental states and mental health issues is close to what we think about, and how to deal with what everyone's dealing with, anxieties and slight depressions or some other like small scale issues. Like those could be handled, I think, very well with some simple AI systems. Like right now, if we even talk about it, like, and I joke constantly about men would rather do X than go to therapy. We don't really necessarily need therapy, but we need like a close friends who can actually provide good kind of feedback. And I think even that is like putting too much pressure on people in our lives that don't really need someone to kind of be moping with them and trying to solve their life issues with them. While AI would not have any of those issues. Like there's no stupid questions. You can ask it all sorts of silly things. It's not going to judge you. You can actually kind of interact with it, and it can, if it can be very effective, then I think it could be a very good tool. One particular mental health practice that I really consider very highly is called cognitive behavior therapy, which has a lot of applications, especially for people with mild depressions and also some anxiety disorders. And I think teaching you how to think differently, to rephrase your mindset, would be a very effective way of kind of helping a lot of people with their daily struggles that don't rise to the level of full psychiatric issues.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on it is because, on the one hand, you're absolutely right. We still have a bit of a stigma, although I don't think we should, but we do.
Yeah.
Attached to people, like men would rather fill in the blank than go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because it's so true.
Yeah.
And yet we also get the hook from our tending to anthropomorphize tech, right?
Yeah.
So if you brought up the movie Her, right? He fell in love. Of course, maybe if it has Scarlett Johansson's voice, I'd fall in love too. Who knows?
Yeah.
So we'd kind of have that going on, but we'd also intellectually know I'm not going to be judged because this is an AI that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's my thesis. I could be totally wrong, but my thesis is people would probably be much more willing to be really honest with an AI, right? Something they might not even be willing to admit to a licensed psychiatrist.
Exactly.
They would in fact admit to the AI, making it much more effective because maybe that's the real problem that they're dealing with. Are there any other than tutoring, mental health? Another one that I put out there, and I got a lot of flack for this one. But was elder care. At least in the United States, we have an aging population. And for the most part, even the families with the absolute best intentions, if they end up putting mom or dad or grandma or grandpa in a elder care facility, we're going to go all the time. We're going to really go and visit them. And then life interrupts and they don't. And so my idea was we should give them all a personalized AIs that they can chat with, that they can reminisce with, that they, and boy, did a lot of people jump on me for that one. They're like, oh, you'd rather give them a machine than, I'm like, no, the other, of course, that's an ideal solution, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, again, I met on Twitter, and I've actually met a lot of wonderful people on Twitter, and I'm really grateful to Twitter and some other social networks that have been very instrumental for me. Again, like I live in a small town far away from, all the happening places in tech. I probably would have gone bananas if I didn't have access to social media. I have all these interesting things that I want to talk to people about, but there's no one around in my town who talks about. I often tell people, and I'm only half joking, that around here AI stands for artificial insemination. So it's small, semi-rural place that people don't really care about tech much, or if they do, it's in very kind of superficial way, which is fine. But having a place like Twitter or some other places very much help me keep my sanity. I meet people like you, and we have these wonderful talks, and I feel pretty fulfilled. So I think, I think if social media can do this, I think other tools that are semi-human like AI can really be helpful as well. And I see no problem with that myself.
Yeah, and I feel strongly that Twitter, despite I think first off, Twitter is pretty anti-fragile, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at all of the either intentional or unintentional attempts to kill it, it doesn't die. It doesn't die. And I think one of the reasons for that is what you just said. Despite all of the hassles and everything, I love it because I get to meet people like you. And I think that it's part of my thesis with the new company is it's a lot easier to change your digital zip code than your postal zip code. right?
Yeah.
And if you can have a platform where you can meet interesting people who share your interests, and then move it on to things like this where you actually speak with them and you actually become friends with them. That's happened to me quite a lot.
Yeah.
But the other thing about it that's really interesting to me is there's a lot of people who do Twitter really badly.
Yeah.
You're good at it. Like, so what do you think is the reason, if you do,
Sure.
that many people do it so badly, and how would you give them some guidance on how to level up a little bit?
I think, I think that different people doing it different ways and different voices, and I kind of appreciate that. What I find, what I try to avoid as much as possible is becoming too confrontational. Like, even if I'm not really agree with you, I don't want to kind of get into arguments. And, there are all sorts of jokes about how futile arguing online is, and it's 100% sure not true. So, humor is one of my ways actually diffusing tension. So even if I'm bringing up some very contentious and very problematic issue, I try to do it in a lighthearted way so that people who disagree with me don't feel kind of threatened or be judged or being attacked in some ways. People will disagree, and I feel that's fine, and this is what our marketplace of ideas is all about. But try to become too argumentative, kind of jumping at people, or try to assert yourself in certain ways that are very confrontational. I think those are things that should be avoided if possible, especially places like Twitter. I think there, if you have like small circle of friends and you have a certain kind of worldview that kind of jives with those people, go into those like little forums and, by all means be as confrontational as you want to be. But, like this public square that's Twitter, I think it's best served if people are a little bit less toxic in the terms of like how they attack each other or kind of go about these things. And there are many things, we talked about, closed feedback loops. That's, I think, one of the reasons why I kind of got better at Twitter, because I would post something, see people's reactions, and kind of make a mental note whether this kind of resonates with people or not. And then kind of repeat that over, many years with many, many little things. So I think a lot of people don't pay attention to what they're doing. They're just doing one thing all the time and not really see like how it resonates. I'm not saying that you have to conform to people around you, but just like see like what really works, what doesn't, then kind of build on that. And so those would be my big messages. And then it depends what you want to do with Twitter. Like, some people just want to kind of build like a particular industry product kind of identity and work around it. That's fine. You want to have it a little bit more personal. That's another thing. That's fine. It's really depends whether you want to grow on Twitter or not. If you don't want it to grow, that's fine too. Like, you just want to kind of absorb information, that's also perfectly okay with me.
I love the way you praised the idea of the public square ideas. And then what I heard, and I'm gonna repeat it because I think it's good advice. If you treat the main timeline more as, look, you're in public here, you're talking to a lot of different people. Would you go to whatever Union Square in Manhattan and start yelling at people? Probably not. Right? But then I also like your solution, which is, if you find a group, take it into the DMs, take it somewhere else, and that way you can do it both ways. So I think that's a really great idea. And another thing we share is a love of reading. And as I was researching you, like, you don't do anything halfway, do you? You have reviewed hundreds of books. You became a top 10 Amazon reviewer in 2011. So how did you get so good at writing book reviews?
It wasn't just book reviews; it was product reviews as well. So like so it's started with books. Kaggle, Twitter, and Amazon reviews were like, and by the way, I'm not Amazon anymore. That's would not take as a complete on tangent why I'm not posting there anymore. But, like you post something and you get like really quick feedback from people. So like, I did the first book review I wrote on Amazon was for a book that I absolutely hated. So like, I just wanted to kind of write a review, tell people, don't read this book. It's totally awful. Please, don't go there. So I posted that. And to my surprise, all of a sudden people are liking this review. And all of a sudden I have a ranking there. Like, okay, this is interesting. I get feedback from my work. That's different from blogging where, like a lot of times you're blogging and pretty much you never get any kind of feedback from people, whether they like your post or not. And it's a very different system. And here I would read books and then like, okay, I'm just going to tell people what I thought about it. And first started books and then later on moved on to products and gadgets. And that's how I kind of got into tech blogging, which was my second and a half career between physics and being a machine learning modeler. But yeah, I definitely read a lot of books. I think my estimate is about 1,200 books that I've read in my life, and I don't read as often or as much as I used to, but I still read about 2 or 3 books a month. So that's my cadence these days. I don't know. I just like it, and I think part of the reason I'm good at Twitter is because I have appreciation for written word, and like when I'm writing a tweet, a lot of times very short, like 3-word tweet would actually take me a long time to compose because I'm kind of weighing how much different words, how much context would resonate. Can I eliminate something? So I just like kind of written word in its own right, and it comes naturally both to read and now write through Twitter.
Yeah, for me too. I share your idea about Twitter and feedback. That because I would do I don't do them as much now as I used to, but I would do very long threads on Twitter.
Yeah,
and friends would say, "Why don't you just do a blog?"
Yeah,
and I'm like, Twitter is the best microblogging site in the world because you get instant feedback, right?
Yep.
And you don't necessarily with blogs. And you have a website actually with your book reviews and gadget reviews, right?
I used to. I think it's down. I need to upgrade the WordPress for that.
Okay. Our researchers find everything.
Yeah, they're better than that. Like if they want to lend me a hand with bringing up the website again, I will. I mean, I've started a lot of kind of side projects over the years. I think if you're a techie person, you pretty much do it all the time. And I needed to kind of upgrade my blog, but it was very low priority, so I never really went back to that. I hope to do a little bit more of that in the future. I would like to kind of have again, one of the things that I'm known for is this machine learning for tabular data, which is sort of a unsexy cousins to natural language processing and image machine learning. But it's a kind of data that pretty much, drives all the transactions that we engage in, from banking, from, shopping online, everything is, recording some kind of transactional database. And it's pretty much 90% of all the data that we have in the world. And there are a lot of opportunities there, a lot of interesting problems still to be solved. And, I would like to kind of start a blog that really explores this whole topic a little bit more systematically at some point when I have more time, which I never do,
Yeah, well, there's the old maxim: if you want something to get really done fast, ask a busy person.
Yeah, that's really resonates with me.
What are some of your favorite books?
So in fiction, I would say, like Nabokov was one of my favorite writers, still is. I think Lolita is absolute masterpiece. It's very controversial even when it was published, and even more today. But in terms of like the writing, it's an absolute masterpiece. Of the contemporary writers, my favorite was Haruki Murakami.
Yeah.
So he has a very quirky, interesting way of looking at the world, and it really caught me, and I really enjoyed his writing. When I was younger, I really enjoyed Milan Kundera. He was one of my favorite writers. These days, few of the books that I really enjoy would be like Steven Pinker's Blank Slate.
Love it. Yep.
Debunking some of our misconceptions about, human minds being just kind of blank slate that you can do anything about. Right now, reading a very interesting book called Thinking Like a State, and like kind of looks at all these very misguided attempts by the states to kind of standardize everything from the architecture to central planning of agriculture and whatnot, and how it invariably leads to kind of disaster because there's so much information on a low level that these central planners don't really take into account, and how it kind of leads to these issues. And and I also think there's a lot of problems in the way that the software projects get structured around these ideas, that they want to have a lot of people want to have a very clean way of structuring the projects, where in the reality there's a lot of messiness that people learn how to work around and even leverage to get ahead. But a lot of central planners don't take these things into account, and you end up with a much more bloated and slower software than really should be. So I think these are kind of interesting ideas to play with.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the problem with central planning or top-down planning is complex adaptive systems. Emergence comes from the bottom for the most part, and trying to invert that is not going to change that. Which is why you get all of these famous fiascos. Because people just don't understand that very, very simple concept. What are you working on right now in the machine learning and AI space that you're most excited about?
Right now, we have a lot of projects within NVIDIA that's building a new gradient boosted trees library. So we, if you follow me on Twitter, XGBoost is one of my catchphrases, and I promote that library a lot, which is also maintained and supported by NVIDIA. I think gradient boosted trees are a very interesting algorithm in their own right, and they've been very successful at all the problems that they've been applied to. And I think we can, but unfortunately, they've been kind of underappreciated and under researched. So compared to neural network, there's just tiny fraction of people actually doing some kind of research on this stuff. And I feel like we can even leverage some of the learnings from neural networks for gradient boosted trees. And that's one of the things I'm kind of working on. I've also been very, my social media presence has been appreciated in many places at NVIDIA. So I help with some product evangelization. So, I got to play with H100s as soon as they became available. So it's a fun little kind of side, not core of my duties at NVIDIA, but like in another project or another function that I like to perform all the time. And was also always a big fan of our Jetson little boards, and I get to play with those and post cute little videos or projects online. So these are kind of projects I work on.
Terrific and lots of fun. Well, Bojan, this has been absolutely fantastic. At the end of each of our chats on Infinite Loops, we wave a wand and we make you the emperor of the world. You can't kill anybody. You can't send anyone to a re-education camp. But what you can do is speak into a magic microphone and incept two ideas, two thoughts into the entire world's population. And whenever their morning is the next day, they're going to wake up and they're going to think that they came up with the two things that you incepted them with, and they're going to act on it immediately.
Yeah.
What are you going to incept?
One would it be like to try to think more probabilistically? So a probabilistic mindset, I think it's a very effective and a very, I think you can diffuse a lot of people's anxieties just by adopting that kind of a mindset. Instead of thinking in terms of black and white, you think on the spectrum of things. And I think probabilistic mindset kind of helps you with that. So even if it's not really any kind of formal probabilistic things, just think about, okay, this is the worst that can happen, but just probability of that is pretty low. And like there are all these other things that are more likely, and try to kind of cognitively kind of reappreciate your own world. Another one of my mottos in life is like, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So, it's one of the 2 or 3 mottos that I kind of repeat to myself all the time, every once in a while. So, it's, all our theoretical musings and high level thinking that we kind of view ourselves with, they're always going to be well short of like what practical considerations we have to have in our lives.
I love both of those. The second one reminded me of the old joke about the 2 old bankers talking to each other. And the one says to the other, "We know that it works in practice. We're just worried it won't work in theory."
Yeah. I think I've seen that in New York. That's it.
Yeah. And the probabilistic thought has been one of the soapboxes that I've been on for a long, long time, because it would just help people so much, I think. Because black, white, yes, no, 0, 100, Aristotelian deterministic thought can be really a nasty place to be if it's either got to be black or white when most things are gray. When most things fall into maybe. Bojan, other than Twitter, where can people find you?
I also have post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, which is mostly the stuff that I post there is similar to the work that I post on Twitter, except all the jokes. So if I post something serious, you can find me there. I do have a Substack blog, but I haven't posted anything in months. Hopefully, I'll revive it. I think Twitter is the best place to find me. I post pretty frequently, although most of my posts are pre-scheduled. So, it's not that I'm really posting all the time. But, I do try to interact with people there. And if you want to have some kind of conversation about something I post there, like I'll be open to interact with you.
Terrific. Well, this has been a lot of fun. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, so did I. Cheers.